and I'm glad to introduce to you someone who is not really a normal guest at journalism conferences around the world. A man who works for the restaurant business, actually one of the leading restaurants in the world, the Danish restaurant in Copenhagen, Noma. And joining us from our studio in Copenhagen, we hopefully have Ben Liebmann sitting there. Ben?
Good morning.
Good morning. You're there. You look good.
That's very
Ben,
nice. I've been told I had a face for radio, so you can
yeah,
say that.
and I have a face for, yeah, I don't know, a language for ballet. But your language is better than mine because you're a native Australian.
I
But
am.
you live in now in Copenhagen. You and I, for the next 15 minutes, we have the task, which is quite difficult, to some way make it relevant that a guy from the food industry is talking to journalists, publishers, and editors around the world. So Ben, let's see if we can do that. You are the COO, the Chief Operation Officer at Noma. So let's try to go back and talk about the food industry back in, let's say, 20 years ago in Copenhagen and basically around the world. Could you describe that briefly? How did it look like?
Well, I mean, as you said, and you can tell by my accent, I'm not in Kansas anymore. So I was in Sydney at that time. But as I'm told by the team here at Noma and the team in Copenhagen, that the restaurant scene was quite similar to other international cities around the world, where you really had a very strong top tier in dining, predominantly based around French cuisine, heavily influenced by the masters of French and European dining. And then you had this lower tier down the bottom, which was much more driven by price, much more driven by speed and accessibility. Not to say that one was poor in terms of quality and the other was not, but you really had those two extremes. And that was similar here as it was in places like London and as you say, other places around the world.
Yeah, can I make the journalistic version of what you just said? And back
Sure.
at the time, there were basically some elite restaurants which tried to copy French cuisine, and then there was a bulk of restaurants basically competing on delivering food to people as cheap as possible, as fast as possible, and as much as possible. Would that be right?
That's true.
And
That's true.
and here's another leading journalistic question. If you
Mm,
look around you, do you see any other industry today that looks like that?
of course. Media and journalism, which is why we're here today. Um,
Exactly. So let's talk about that in a moment on and how's that. But
yeah.
let's go back again 20, 18 years ago. There was a Danish chef, son of an immigrant,
Yeah.
who René Redzepi, who started to rethink the food scene, rethink the concept of a restaurant in Copenhagen. What was it? What was the driving forces, the focus points of that?
Yeah, I mean, Rene had traveled the world like many young cooks, young chefs of his age had done. He had worked under some of the greats in the United States, in France, in Spain, and was coming back to Copenhagen to really start his project, his life's work. Um, and happened upon an opportunity to create a restaurant a couple of kilometers from where we're sitting today on Copenhagen Harbour. Um, with what started at the time with the simple premise of um, cooking the cuisine of Denmark, and driven by a very singular mission, a very singular purpose, the North Star, as he has referred to it, of Noma, which was time and place, which was that wherever you were in the world, one should cook, drawing upon the produce, the provenance, the storytelling of where they were, and the time of year that they were operating in at that time. And as you say, it was a different time. As we touched upon, you had this very high end, heavily influenced by French and European cuisine. You had this lower end based on price point. Again, I don't want to make that distinction in terms of quality, but really what you had was this gaping middle. And really over the last 15, 20 years, both within the restaurant itself, but very much outside of it in the work that he has been doing, was also set upon trying to reposition the way in which we value food, which again perhaps is a theme for this conference and the people gathering today, is to value where food comes from, to value the people that produce it, to value the people that serve it and create it for you. Um, one of the other things that was important to Noma at the beginning, and something that you and I have touched upon in our conversations together is this idea around putting constraints around creativity. That when you put constraints around creativity, and in this case it was this idea of time and place, you force creativity to burst through in unexpected ways. Now, what did that mean for Noma? Well, when you are cooking with what the landscape can give you here in Denmark, and if you could see what I walked through this morning, it wasn't sunny, it wasn't warm, it was grey and it was cold. You immediately limit what you can access. Things that many other restaurants, many other creators within our industry take for granted. Olive oil, herbs, spices that have become commonplace, citrus, things like that. What that forced was the restaurant to kind of go back to the beginning with a clear sense of purpose, with a clear sense of value, and to explore the country, the landscape around them. And that was really the basis of their creativity.
So you mentioned a word, purpose.
Yes.
The purpose could be, I mean, give people some good food. Isn't that purpose? Make some money on people being hungry?
Yeah, although I would say if that was its purpose, if profit was purely its purpose, there are far easier ways to do that, both within the restaurant and hospitality industry or just industries across the board. This is a very labor-intensive, time-intensive industry. There are other ways of doing that. I think what Renee wanted to do and what the team continue to do is create an experience. If all you were looking for was sustenance and to be fed, don't come to Noma. That's a part of it. The bigger piece is the experience and then the storytelling that weaves through that. And the primary way to tell that story is through what we serve our guests 5 days a week, most weeks of the year. It's through our sense of service and hospitality, but it's also the storytelling that wraps around that as well.
And fast forward to today, and let me, besides the fact that the restaurant is closed down like any other restaurant in Copenhagen due to COVID, the situation for Noma is probably that is one of the leading Danish brands around the world, maybe only exceeded by Lego, Carlsberg, and maybe the royal family. But besides that, could you say how big, what has the influence been on this new way of thinking? Has it only affected the elite restaurants for the very rich people?
No. I think the influence of Renee and the entire team of Noma is really like a pebble being dropped into a lake. The ripple effect is enormous, both immediate, delayed impact, but also direct and indirect. As you say, he and many of the restaurants that came up around that time and were inspired by the work of Noma, including by former chefs who had worked alongside Renee in the kitchen, helped put the Danish dining scene and hospitality scene on the map, and helped establish that scene as a key reason why people come to Denmark. I can't remember the statistics that the industry shared earlier in this year, but I think it was anywhere between 10 and 15% of all people who visit Denmark come primarily for some type of dining and culinary experience.
So the front page version of what you just said is that it was not only affecting the elite, it has piled down, it has changed the focus of the whole food restaurant business. I mean, even the burgers at McDonald's have improved in quality. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it may be a leap on our behalf to take credit for that. I'm sure there are other factors and considerations that have driven that. But I think to your point, um, Noma has been very fortunate to have hundreds and hundreds of over the years, probably thousands over the years. It's
Mm,
approaching its 20th anniversary of
mm,
people that have come from around the world, me included, to work with the restaurant. Many of them have left to pursue their own dreams, their own life's work.
mm,
Some of that is in the kitchen, some of it is not, in other adjacent areas, including nonprofits. But even inside the culinary industry, they have left to pursue their dreams, perhaps with the same sense of purpose, perhaps with the same values, perhaps with the same mission, but they have applied it in a way that is true to them, whether that be opening a taqueria here
mm,
in central Copenhagen or going back to the United States and opening a barbecue restaurant.
mm.
Their iteration on the same purpose and the same values is what binds the two together, but not in the same kind of everybody who comes and leaves Noma at
No.
some point goes on to want to recreate fine dining. No,
But Ben, you come out basically also from the media world. Your parents worked
I
in the
do.
media business. You worked there yourself before entering this industry.
Yeah.
So when you see our profession, journalism, the news industry from the outside, what do you see and what can we learn from people from Noma?
It's funny, as you say, father was a journalist. I started my career in the music industry and then moved into television, primarily in the television production side, working with the likes of Fremantle Media and the Shine Group. Um, and now we as Noma are starting to make our foray into that space as well, establishing a new company to tell thoughtful, purposeful stories with social impact at their heart.
Mm,
And perhaps borrowing some of the language from the restaurant industry, we talk about wanting to tell stories that are perhaps higher in calories
mm,
than just those quick burn, energy inefficient stories. You and I have talked about um, perhaps for all of us, but certainly for a fledgling media company here in Denmark, um, the challenges to compete in the attention economy or the speed economy. And really, I think where we want to focus our attention and where I would encourage as best as we can everybody who is joining you over the next 24 hours, both on screen and in the audience, to think more around the intention economy.
mm.
That, yes, the news will report where it bleeds, it will report the fire. Journalism, like much of media, does now have a profit imperative. But profit without purpose, as a former boss of mine said, is a recipe for disaster. And profit and purpose do not have to be mutually exclusive. In actual fact, where those two things can come together is really where that special rub is. That is where true impact can be felt.
Ben Liebmann, thank you for being inspiring. Keep up the good
Thank you.
work. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thanks. Thanks.